Kunja Vihari, Jai Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Jai Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, Jasodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana, Sarvanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Yamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, just Shodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana, Shodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. We are in the second canto, chapter 2. Are we in text 20?
Yes.
Okay. So what we do is first I explain the word so that when we chant it, you have some idea what you're chanting. So nabhyam means on the navel. That's where we get the word navel. Nabi, navel. So nabhyam, this is the universal form. Stitam. Oh, no, actually, this is not the universal form. This is the meditation on the body of the Lord. So nabhyam stitam. Hridi adhiropya tasmad. Udana gatya. See what's going on here. Udasi tang nayet muni katak anusandaya diya manasi swatalu mulam shanakai nayeta. So this is actually the process of bringing the life air. This is the mechanical process of freeing the soul by bringing the soul up with the life air. Actually, not the soul, but the life air. Bring the life air up. So it's anabhya means in the navel or on the navel. Stitam, situated. Hridya, the European, and then raising it up to the heart. Tasmat, from there. Udana, gatya, by the Udana breath. Prabhupada says soaring. Udana literally means going up. Udasi on the chest, because there's a heart. And then up here to the chest, tongue, and then one should lead that up to the chest, the sage. Tatonu Sandaya, then searching out, as Prabhupada says, Diya, with intelligence. Manaswi, the thoughtful sage, meditative, Prabhupada says, Swatalu Mulam, the root of the palate. Talu is the palate by the root of one's own palate. Shandakaya, gradually, slowly, one should bring it there. So this is, of course, something that we don't do nowadays. It's a mechanical process, but anyway, we'll chant this verse. Nabhyang stitang hridyati ropya tasmad. Udanagatyoda nayen muni. Tatonu sandhaya dhiyamanasvi Swatalulang shanakairnayeta Nabhyang stitang hridyadiropya tasmat Dhanagatyodasitang nayenmuni Tatonu sandhaya dhiyamanasvi Satabumulang shanakairnayeta
Nabhyam stitam hridyadiropya tasmat
Nabhyang stitang
Udanagatyo rasitam naye muni Tato shandhaya dhiya manasvi Satalumulam shanakarnayeta
So, translation, the meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. Prabhupada's purport. There are 6 circles of the movement of the life air. And the intelligent bhakti yogi should search out these places with intelligence and in a meditative mood. Among these, mentioned above, is the Swadhisthana chakra, or the powerhouse of the life air. And above this, just below the abdomen and navel, is the Manipura chakra. When upper space is further searched out in the heart, one reaches the Anahata chakra, and further up, when the life air is placed at the root of the palate, one reaches the Vishuddhi chakra. So, one interesting point here is we can see is that in reading or hearing Prabhupada's teachings, one has to be intelligent, because Prabhupada says here that the intelligent bhakti yogi should search out these places with intelligence and in a meditative mood. And yet, someone could say this is a direct instruction. So all the followers of Prabhupada have to now start looking for these chakras. But of course, as we know, Prabhupada would be very surprised and displeased if one of his disciples said, I'm not preaching anymore on Sankirtan, I'm too busy looking for these chakras inside of me. And so what it means is one cannot be a foolish reader. Someone just wrote a book, I think, saying that everything Prabhupada said, what's it?
I just got a copy. Prabhupada is Shastra.
Prabhupada is Shastra, even though Prabhupada says he's not. So it's interesting. You get to this logical impossibility to accept everything Prabhupada said is true. And I've explained this many times. Logical impossibility means it's like saying that John is a bachelor, but he's married. So it's never simply by the meaning of the words that John is a bachelor, he's not married. So to say John, the bachelor, is married is logically impossible. Or if you say that, that this circle forms a perfect square, that's logically impossible, because something cannot be at the same time, in the same relevant sense, a circle and a square. So certain things are just logically impossible. It's not impossible because I'm sure that could never happen. It's impossible just because the very words that express it are meaningless. And so in the same way, Prabhupada, I've written a paper on this, which, some people have read, those, and in which I showed that Prabhupada claims many times, states many times, that he is not materially infallible. And if you think that, you don't understand our philosophy. If you think that, you don't understand our philosophy. So Prabhupada insists that he and any Vaishnav teacher is speaking infallibly when he or she is repeating Shastra. So Prabhupada makes this clear distinction. So, for example, Prabhupada once said to me in Mayapur, actually, in February, it was 1975, he asked me if I could look at the fifth canto and try to figure it out. And he gave the same instruction to Harisari because Prabhupada just sort of gave a basic translation, but wasn't sure what it really meant. So Prabhupada says, I don't really fully understand all these technical, mathematical things. Then, so what's interesting is that if Prabhupada says that I make mistakes on material things, does Shastra make mistakes about material things? Or what about Prabhupada's system of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra? Prabhupada said these are three separate things. So if you say the Guru is Shastra, again, you are rejecting Prabhupada's teachings and, in fact, rejecting the teachings of our Sampradaya because these three distinctions are made. And so if Prabhupada is Shastra, if someone says Prabhupada is Shastra, that means someone not only doesn't accept Prabhupada as Shastra, it means they don't even accept Prabhupada as presenting the philosophy properly. So in other words, the people who say Prabhupada is Shastra accept Prabhupada less than those of us who actually know what Prabhupada taught, namely that there are three categories, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. I show this with by examining one word, how Prabhupada uses one word in two very different ways. The word is opinion. You can find dozens of statements from Prabhupada where he says, if someone, this is a typical scene, Prabhupada's giving a lecture somewhere, someone in the audience asks a question and says, well, in your opinion, Prabhupada immediately cuts off the person and says, it is not my opinion, it is the fact. This is not a question of opinion. So, or Prabhupada saying, I never gave my opinion. He makes statements like this. I never gave my opinion. When did I ever give you my opinion? That's one category. Then there's another list of statements, which are numerous, where Prabhupada says something like, well, that's just my opinion. In my opinion. And he really means it. Well, that's just my opinion. So how, because if you look at the two lists of statements, on the one hand, when Prabhupada says, I never gave my opinion, it is not my opinion, he's quoting Shastra. And every time he says, this is just my opinion, he's talking about some non-Shastric material matter. So, for example, Prabhupada says in the purport in the Gita that the hottest months of the year are May and June, which is true, but only true in North India. Whereas, for example, in the West Coast of the United States, the hottest months are August and September, which please fact check me, you'll find out that that's true. And if you look at the eastern part of the Midwest of the United States, the hottest months are probably July and August.
Or Uruguay.
Uruguay.
Yeah. So
Oh, that's the southern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, the hottest months are probably December and January. Sometimes February, depending on the year. So, in other words, and there's a famous conversation with Prabhupada. There's a famous conversation where Jayagweta is directly asking Prabhupada, what is the perfection of a pure devotee? In other words, how is a pure devotee perfect? And he specifically mentions that sometimes you say things, Prabhupada, which turn out not to be, factual from the material point of view. And Prabhupada said, he stresses the point that if you think the guru is perfect materially, you don't understand our philosophy. That's not our philosophy. So therefore, the question is Shastra perfect? For example, are there mistakes in the Bhagavad Gita? Because if there aren't mistakes in the Bhagavad Gita, then there's a difference between the speaking of a pure devotee and the speaking of Shastra. Because Prabhupada says, so if Prabhupada says, I make mistakes, if everything Prabhupada says is true, then it's true that he makes mistakes. So if you accept everything Prabhupada says is true, then you don't accept everything Prabhupada says is true. In other words, it's a logical contradiction. If you say that everything Prabhupada says is true, then it's true that he makes mistakes. But if you say Prabhupada doesn't make mistakes, then you don't accept everything Prabhupada says is true. So what's the resolution? Prabhupada gave the resolution. Prabhupada said, I speak infallibly when I am citing Shastra. So for example, Prabhupada said, this is all in the paper I wrote. Prabhupada says that if you think that because I'm the guru, therefore, because I'm Prabhupada, therefore, I'm speaking perfectly about, let's say, medical science. Prabhupada says that is ludicrous. The word ludicrous, which actually doesn't, they don't have that word in Spanish. But the word ludicrous in English means something which is so absurd that it's comical. It's not only absurd, but it's so absurd that it's actually comical. So that's what Prabhupada says about that the thesis of that book. It's so absurd that it's comical. And that book, it basically obliterates the system of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, which is the basis of our philosophy. That I mentioned that.
You still raise the question, is Shastra perfect?
It's not so perfect.
Yeah.
That's interesting because the devotees that are working on the TOVP, which will obviously bring millions of Western tourists, because what intelligent person in the West is not going to want to see a very large Hare Krishna dome in East India? But anyway, so you have all these statements, and then I think even Prabhupada said one time, H.D.Goswami was not an astronomer or something. So I'm not going to weigh in on that. But what I will say is this: when Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that famous verse, Tadvidhi pranipatena, literally know this or learn this from those who have knowledge. Krishna says that the people who are qualified to serve as gurus are the tattvadarshis. And darshi means seer, it means seer of the truth. But the word tattva, which is translated truth, tattvadarshi, seer of the truth, means truth in a special way in Sanskrit. There are different words in Sanskrit that you could translate as truth that are translated, but they actually have different meanings. So the word tattva specifically means a categorical or ontological truth. You've heard me explain this. I'll say it again. Tat is, we have the word tat in English, just put an H in to that. And twa means a state of being. So just like sundara means beauty or beautiful. So sundara twa means a state of being beautiful. So tatvam means something. So therefore, because it means the condition of the state of being that. So what does that mean? It's that is a demonstrative pronoun, and therefore, since you can't demonstrate something that doesn't exist, tat in Sanskrit philosophical shorthand or jargon comes to mean a real thing, as in Om Tat Sat. So tat, that, is just the simple, neuter pronoun that. but it can mean a real object. So tattva means the state of being a real object, a real thing. And so therefore, it comes to mean a category. Tattva, like for example, Vishnu Tattva. Vishnu Tattva means the category or the group of real things, which are Vishnu. And that's a category, so there's only one member of that set. There's only one God, of course, in different forms. And then you have Jiva Tattva. It means the ontological category of Jiva, Jiva Tattva. And it's actually funny. I mean, I've said it so many times, but some people who don't pay attention to what Prabhupada actually taught say that we come from the Tatastha Shakti, for the marginal potency. The funny thing is that there is no place called Tatastha Shakti. It's not a place. It's a category. So how can you come from a category? Anyway, it's silly. So so tattva means the category of real things. So there are basically three categories of real things, which are the category of God, the category of the jiva, the individual soul, and the category of dead matter, prakriti. So someone that knows these things correctly is tattvadarshi. And Prabhupada's pranam mantra, the last part of it, is referring to this. Nirvishesha Sunyori Paschat, no, Nirvishesha, that's the word I was thinking of, Nirvishesha. Vishesha in Sanskrit means a distinction. And Nirvishesha means those who cannot make proper distinctions, sometimes translated impersonalist. And so this is related to the three tattvas. So for example, you have to distinguish jiva from Ishvara. If you confuse those two categories, so you think that jiva is God, or you think when Krishna comes to this world, he's a jiva, that is nirvishesha. It's the inability to make a proper distinction. Or if you think Krishna's body is material, or if you think you are your body. So, in other words, if you confuse these three tattvas, these three categories, then you have committed the fault of nirvishesha. You have not made proper distinctions. So, if you look at the Bhagavatam, not only Prabhupada's pranam mantra, if you look at the Gita, that upadekshanti, which is just the future plural verb of upadesha, instruction. So upadekshanti means they will instruct. They actually, that verse 434 is really talking about a group of people. In other words, all those who are jnanias, who actually have knowledge and who are tattvadarshi. So it's that group, that people in that group will give you knowledge because they have knowledge and they've seen tattva. They've seen the truth. So so that's actually the qualification. That's actually the qualification. Interestingly, in the verse previous, 433, which no one ever seems to quote, one thing, 'cause it might be embarrassing, because if you start a verse with tut, that you learn, then as I say, the obvious question is, what is that? I mean, English or Sanskrit, if you begin a verse with that, it has to be referring to something. And so if you look at the previous verse, which I think doesn't really happen very much. If you look at the previous verse, it says that essentially that Krishna says serving me through knowledge is much more important, is much better than serving me through rituals. Obviously, there are hundreds of places among the Vaishnavas that didn't get that memo. So, but that's what Krishna says. He says, Shayan Dravya Mayad Yagyat, greater than, better than, finer than. Shreya is the comparative degree of Sri. Sri means beautiful or prosperous, fortunate, and then very Sri is Shreyas. So better than Javya Mayat Yagya. Yagya means, of course, offering to Krishna, serving Krishna. And better than service, which consists of Dravya. Maya means consists of. So what is Dravya? Dravya is material paraphernalia. Dravya is material paraphernalia. So, for example, I mean, quintessentially, the articles of Artik, where you offer incense and then a lamp, the ghee wicks, and that's all dravya in Sanskrit. And so Krishna says, better than that is to serve me through knowledge. Actually, Prabhupada directly told me that. He sort of said something very bold. Well, he often did that. Prabhupada in 1974 called me to his room in Mayapur, asked me to be the GBC of Latin America. And the next day he told me, do not spend a lot of time building temples and doing puja. He said, for the more advanced devotees, there is service through knowledge, teaching, studying. Again, I don't know who got that memo, but that's what Prabhupada told me, and that's basically, he just paraphrased Bhagavad Gita 4:33. And then Krishna says you should learn that by hearing from Tattvadarshis. And then in the next verse he says that when you have learned from them, because Krishna says better is the jnana maya, the service, devotional service that consists of teaching, learning and teaching knowledge. And what is that knowledge? Ultimately, what is the knowledge? What is the tattva? That's explained in 435. That all living beings are in me and are mine. So 433, 34, and 35 are really one statement. They're one little paragraph. And so the real purpose of ISKCON is not just to build big temples. I mean, that's also nice, but it's not the main activity. The main activity is understanding and teaching people, teaching the world that we are all part of Krishna. And therefore, naturally, we have to serve Krishna, just as Prabhupada's great examples as the hand serves the body. So that's what Krishna is actually teaching. That's what he's teaching. I wonder sometimes, let's say, like, millions and millions and millions of people that go to some of our big temples in different parts of the world, and they stand in line for darshan. I can't help wondering how many of them are praying for pure devotional service, and how many of them are praying for their families, for themselves, for their businesses, for this, for that, for their, maybe sick grandparent or something, which is, it's not bad, but how many of them, I mean, is anyone even counting? Does anyone even care?
I did.
What?
I did.
You did? You counted?
No. I was in India before I met the devotees. I would visit the temples, even the mosques. I asked, why are you praying?
Really? What
I
they
wanted to
say?
know. And it was, everyone was treating the temple like a big Amazon.com. You give your punya points and you get a special delivery package. I was like, expected something deeper, and it was,
Like self-realization.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's a deal. I mean, if you put 100 rupees in the box and you get thousands of rupees worth of services,
yeah.
no wonder they're so anxious to have temples. It's yeah. So getting people to come to a temple is of course good. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvidha Bhajante Mam, four kinds of people worship me. And he says they're all Sukriti. They're all, well, in Spanish, it's usually bienhechores, literally. Sukriti. They're doing good. They're all doing good. Jana Sukritino Arjuna. But only one of them is actually on the transcendental platform. Because Krishna gives the four, Arto, Jigyasur, Arto means literally a suffering person. Arto is a suffering person, Jigyasur, curious, Artharthi, which is kind of a play on words, because Artha can mean, like they say, the bolsa de valores, because it means value or purpose, because a purpose entails a value. If you have a purpose, it entails that you value something. That's why it's your purpose, but it can also mean money. So it's like the English word value, which can mean money or it can mean a purpose or something that you care about. But anyway, so an RT means someone who's seeking value. And it usually, I mean, in actual Sanskrit literature, it means like someone who's begging for money or someone who's requesting a gift or some kind of value. So artharthi means someone who's I'm trying to think of a clever way of translating it. But anyway, artharthi, and then finally gyanicha, the one who has knowledge. And this word gyani, in Sanskrit, gyani is exactly the same word as gyanavan. It means exactly the same thing. And so Krishna says, after many births, the gyanavan surrenders to me. After many births, the gyanavan. And he says, Tesham Gyani Nitya, that the Gyani is best of these four. So these four kinds of people come to ISKCON. Now, in the old days, of course, to come to ISKCON meant you moved into a Hare Krishna temple. And I guess you were like marginal because you didn't live in a temple, but they still accepted you.
Sort of.
Sort of, yeah. Yeah. He was Tatasta.
It was truly sort of.
So, but what's interesting, it used to be that if people came to our temples, not just lived, but came to our temples to worship and everything, we would really drill it into them, our philosophy. But of course, that doesn't happen nowadays. Now, if you build a temple and someone comes to the temple and gives a donation, it's sort of like a complete package. It's like mission accomplished. And if those people who are coming to the temple can get more people to come to the temple and do the exchange, then that's even better because then you can build a bigger temple. It's like that famous old story of the farmer in Nebraska where he's working really hard planting corn. And so someone said, "Why are you working so hard?" He said, "Well, this year I'm planting more corn." "Why?" "I can buy more land." "Why?" "Plant more corn." So actually, without preaching, it's on the material platform. That's in the Bhagavatam, by the way. Don't kill the messenger. In the Bhagavatam, it is said, Archayam Eva, Haraye Pujam Jakshadayehate. Literal, be a very literal translation. One who undertakes, ihate, one who undertakes puja, worship, adoration of Hari, of the Lord, Archayam Eva, only in deity worship. Archa is a deity form, Archa Vigraha, and then Archayam means in the deity form. So Archayam Eva, only in the deity worship. Archayam Eva Haraye, unto Hari, Pujang Jakshadaye, the one who undertakes in this life, undertakes puja, Natad Bhakteshu, but one does not worship or honor, puja also just means honor. One does not honor in the same way the devotees. Chanyeshu, or just other living being. Then it said Sabhakta, that devotee, Prakrita is materialistic, is on the material platform. We have a sort of an old habit of thinking that someone who's a Hare Krishna is somehow spiritual, is on the spiritual platform. But the Bhagavatam says no. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So what does it mean to do puja to devotees? We know that on the second class platform, Madhyam Adhikari, that a person makes friendship with devotees. And then Anyeshu, and then to make friendship or to honor other people. So if we are not preaching, or if we're not trying to, in other words, if you don't see Krishna in the hearts of all beings, if you, the materialism is very easy to discern here, because if you think that Krishna is only present in a particular building, and then once you walk out of that building, put your shoes on, you can just kind of do what you want. That's a material understanding of God. God lives in that building. Here's his address. If you're ever in the neighborhood, stop by and say hello.
I have a doctor's appointment, but I'll listen to the line.
Thanks. So, so I think, okay, we'll stop very soon. So this is, it's an issue that should be discussed. Because it turns out now that according to the Bhagavatam, probably a strong majority of all the members of the Hare Krishna movement are on the material platform. Because if you look at the millions of people who come to our temples and, make some little offering, but don't really cultivate strong friendship with the devotees. Of course, some of them do, but probably most of them don't. And or don't really get into the spirit of this, because it's when you begin to actively participate in the Sankirtan mission, where you really want to spread Krishna consciousness, that you become a Madhyamadikari. And the Kanishta Adhikari, according to the Bhagavatam, is not on the spiritual platform. So it's not true that all the members of ISKCON are on the spiritual platform. In fact, nowadays, it seems like a very large percentage of them are not. And of course, it's still good. Krishna says if you just worship Krishna because you need the money, or you're suffering, or you're curious, Krishna says that's still Sukriti. It's still a person who's doing good. It's not that there's no benefit, it's just not the spiritual platform. So, one interesting question would be, to what extent is ISKCON becoming the religion that we left to join ISKCON? I think that's an interesting question. Anyway, I'll stop there before I get myself in more trouble.
My question.
Yes.
Historically, this Prabhupada system is sort of,
Can you be heard of?
um, the system of Sadhu Shastra, Sadhu Guru,
Guru Sadhu Shastra.
Guru Sadhu Shastra. What's the, what was it? Was that around before Prabhupada?
Narottam Das Thakur talks about it. Prabhupada quotes Narottam Das Thakur. Narottam, I'd say it in ISKCON sense, Narottam. Narottama Thakur. He talked about it, probably quotes other authorities on it. And it's just a fact. Also in the Bhagavatam, it's very interesting. If you look at the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami explicitly tells the sages, I'm going to teach you tattva. And then, and also in subsequent verses in the first canto, in the first couple of chapters, Sutta Goswami explains what his curriculum is. And he's going to teach tattva. And Krishna says in the Gita that you have to learn from, approach and learn from the Tattvadarshis. So I've shown from the Bhagavatam, from the Gita, that basically what bona fide gurus teach is tattva. Of course, we learn about Krishna. But to learn Krishna tattva or Vishnu tattva includes understanding his spiritual body, understanding his pastimes, because that's all the nature of Krishna. His Leela is a manifestation of his divine nature. And so even if you're, let's say, hearing about Krishna's pastimes, it's still Krishna Tattva. That's still in the category of Krishna Tattva. So it's all explained in my paper, Understanding Prabhupada. I show how in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, where sort of, so to speak, the program is being laid out, like this is what's going to happen in this Bhagavatam. And it's explicitly where the sage is headed by Shaunika. Shaunika, by the way, one of the most eloquent speakers in the Bhagavatam, not usually given credit, but if you look at the questions and statements made by Shaunika, he's a brilliant, brilliant speaker. So Shaunika, the senior sage at Naimisharanya, inquiring from Sutta. So what they want to hear and what Sutta says he's going to speak is tattva.
What about the Leelas that we can't verify? Would they still be considered tattva?
Well, if you can't verify it, then you can't verify it. I'm not in the habit of considering unverified statements to be eternally true. I always tell a story. There was one senior ISKCON sannyasi and guru who used to always give guided tours around Govardhan. Actually, I should do it this way. That's the way he said. So give guided tours around Govardhan to senior devotees. Who's giving me a tour, and here at this spot, the gopis said to Krishna, and here Krishna did this to the gopis. So after a while, he said, "How do we know these things are true?" And he stopped. I was a little confused by my question, and he said to me, he'd given dozens and dozens of tours. He said, "No one ever asked me that," which I thought was a very interesting little piece of cultural anthropology that fell into my lap. So, generally the standard is if it's not rasa vasa, in other words, it's not sort of a contradiction of rasas, and people say, oh, well, what the heck. And there are, famous Leela reciters in Vrindavan, this temple that, go on and on and on about this pastime. I remember one time I was just sort of listening in, and this senior reciter was telling the story how there was sort of like this duel between one of the great Vaishnavas, maybe like second or third generation from Lord Chaitanya, and they were to see who really, was a more powerful sage. And so the Sufi mystic just created a boundary wall. I mean, that's of course very Indian, a boundary wall. And so then the Vaishnav, our hero, then sat on the boundary wall and began flying on it, thereby proving he had greater mystic power and came from the more genuine tradition. The funny thing about this is that exact same story is told by Sufis, Muslim Sufis, where the Sufi sage flies on the boundary wall. So it's just sort of a popular folk tale in India that probably many religions apply to show that, their guy is the guy. And it's obviously not in any Shastra, it's just a good story. So when it comes to this Leela, if it's a good story, run with it. I'm not saying it's like it's evil or something, but I think we should at least be conscious of these different categories, because Prabhupada's intention, clearly stated, repeatedly stated intention, was to attract intelligent people to ISKCON. And if we want to do that, we have to be intelligent, and we have to understand different categories of theology. Yes.
So what about, see,
So you were making a point earlier that the profession knowledge is to surrender to Krishna. Um, so we've seen a lot of very simple devotees that are not very they don't like read all the books and all that, but they accept the fact that Krishna is God and they should
Yes.
I don't have to read all the books. I should accept it. So what about those devotees, Maharaj?
They're very good devotees. We all know the story of Kolavecha Sridhar, who made little, a very simple profession. And yet Lord Chaitanya was very pleased with him. Just so I'm certainly not saying that, some of them are, as Prabhupada would say, rascals, and some of them are very good devotees. Just depends on what else they do in life.
Yeah.
However, strategically speaking, it's a fact that we will not make this movement successful if we only have wonderful, simple devotees. I mean, we give them all respect. There's no lack of respect for their devotion, but it's not going to make a successful Hare Krishna movement. Prabhupada emphasized that that in order to succeed, we have to attract intelligent people. That's why he said the university students are our best customers. I guess back then, most of the Sudras weren't going to college like now. But also, I mean, Prabhupada wrote to me, he said, if you want to preach, if you're going to preach to intelligent people, you have to be educated. And so Prabhupada said, we have the mass, we need the class. Well, let's fact check. And what we find is that we didn't get it. And I always say this because it's kind of amusing that back in the day, when Prabhupada was here and he was saying, we have the mass, we need the class, I don't think a single devotee in ISKCON thought that when Prabhupada said we have the mass, that he was talking about him or her. Everyone assumed Prabhupada was talking about someone else. Or when Prabhupada said we have to boil the milk, no one thought that they were going to get boiled out of ISKCON. But now, here we are, decades later, that old song, Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Where have all the Prabhupada disciples gone? What percentage of Prabhupada's disciples that are living, of course, or even let's go back 10 years, maybe, or 15 years when, there are many more than living, what percentage of them are engaged in active service, not coming on Sunday to just to, have a feast, and even though they're already, maybe a little overweight, a lot of them, but not just coming on Sunday to see your friends and kind of that's nice to see the deities, but I'm saying actively engaged in Prabhupada's mission. Prabhupada, when we were young and Prabhupada was elderly, he gave his life to save us. So Prabhupada's example is you don't retire. It's funny, you hear so many like Prabhupada say, well, yeah, I want to just retire to Radha Kunda or Govardhan or something. When did Prabhupada retire? They were saved because Prabhupada didn't retire.
That's a good point.
In fact, Prabhupada got on the boat when he was way past retirement age. So, yeah, Prabhupada didn't retire, and therefore I was saved, but I will retire. Or we'll just continue making little, record, bhajan albums with music that 99, percent of the people can't understand. But, why do we need to make music that people actually understand? Well, ask Narottam Das Thakur that question. So it's funny. What brought Kali Yuga is just sort of the arrogant Brahmins didn't care about the people. So has ISKCON created a real Brahmin class to put a head on society? Or are we just creating the next generation of, arrogant Brahmins that don't really care that much about the world and are content in their own superiority? So, a movement or a business that's incapable of self-criticism. There's a corporation that simply doesn't do self-criticism. They're not going to be successful, isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean, you look at these big successful corporations, whether it's an airline or a tech company or whatever it is, and every morning they get together and they do self-criticism.
Right.
We never do that. So yeah, I think it's an important service to Prabhupada, not just to be sort of blindly go along and then make movies that show how we're perfect with an exclamation point, perfect exclamation point, uh, in which practically all the intelligent public took as just a PR film as opposed to a serious documentary. Yeah, I mean, someone's got to sort of sound the alarm. There's that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So how do we bring those devotees back? The ones that they were once enamored with, ISKCON or following Prabhupada, no desire. It's just how do we bring those back?
First of all, you have to ask, are they bringable? Because it'd be nice. I mean, the idea, no, instead of just making new devotees, let's really try to bring back the old ones. That's been going on for 40 years. It's not that that's a new idea. I mean, that's been going on forever. And some people come back to the, I mean, and what does it mean to come back? Does it mean to come back to the Sunday feast? Does it mean to again become active in Prabhupada's mission? Define come back.
Right. The latter, let's just say.
Yeah, well, I have my personal experiences. Some of my god brothers, let's say, or even god sisters, who are just old friends, people I really know very well, and I've pleaded with them, begged them, preached to them for years to do something, to get the movement going, and not really that interested. So, I think what we need to do is, of course, anyone. I mean, if some older devotee or middle level devotee, I mean, anyone that wants to come and do service, that's great. I found the best way to bring back to ISKCON intelligent people is to preach intelligently. And I've gotten hundreds of letters from intelligent people, professional people said they came back to ISKCON because they heard a presentation which was logical and rational, and therefore they came back. So I think, if we really want a powerful movement, we want to attract intelligent people either to come back or to join for the first time, then we have to make an intelligent presentation, which doesn't mean just inviting them to come to a big building where a lot of very elaborate, opulent rituals are going on. I'm not saying we shouldn't worship the deity in a beautiful way. I'm just saying that's not going to save the Western countries. And Prabhupada told me it wouldn't and told me not to focus on that. I have personal instruction from Prabhupada on that. So anyway, good luck, ISKCON.
It kind of goes back to what you said about the previous verse that
Yeah,
Krishna
knowledge.
said your knowledge is
Well, so here's the simple question. How much money does ISKCON spend on rituals? I gotta say it. You heard it in touch. What? No, but I mean, but you, okay, I'm gonna get in trouble with Leela. She's heard it so many times, she's about to run out of the room screaming.
Editor.
But it's a simple thing. You put your money where your, I don't know, your mukha, where your preaching is. No, it's 1 second. I'm not gonna. And that is, if you think something is important, there's a new angle. If you think something is important, then you invest in it. So do the math. In ISKCON North America, how much is being invested in educational programs, and how many millions of dollars are being spent to build new temples?
she would know that.
So anyway, I'll stop here. before, otherwise Leela's not gonna make breakfast for me. Anyway,